I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. It is Thursday. It's Thursday, September 29th, 2022. Welcome back to continuing coverage of Hurricane Ian from the Carolina Weather Group, coming to you live tonight on a multitude of platforms, the Carolina Weather Group, YouTube, Facebook, and streaming on the Carolina Weather Net. We have crews for you throughout the area watching as Ian has again become a hurricane. If you were with us last night, you already know, of course, the big national news, which was that Ian made landfall in Florida yesterday as a catastrophic, very strong Category 4 hurricane. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone in Southwest Florida, across the state, impacted by this historic storm. The eye continued across Florida and back out into the Atlantic Ocean, where it briefly became a tropical storm and now has re-strengthened into a hurricane. It was something we talked about on our Wednesday Night Live program, and here we are 24 hours later looking at Hurricane Ian, once again set to make landfall in South Carolina by 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Our Carolina Weather Group panel is standing by to bring you the latest forecast and the latest analysis. Dan Whitaker joins us from Charleston Harbor on what will be anticipated to be a major flood event there tomorrow. Dan is also going to show us some new video that he shot while in Florida yesterday. We have Jared Smith of CHSWX Charleston Weather, who will give us the latest forecast analysis. I'm here in Charlotte, and of course we have Scotty Powell in the foothills of western North Carolina on what will be a possible landslide flooding event there. Let's start with you, Jared, as we are keeping a very close eye on what the situation is like tonight in Charleston and how it will change over the next 24 hours as we look live at the College of Charleston. Jared, what is top of your mind this evening?
Top of my mind this evening is, where is this thing going to end up? Now, we like to tell people is like, don't focus too much on the center because the impacts are going to be far out. And yes, absolutely, the impacts of this are going to be very far out. They're spreading. The tropical storm force winds spread hundreds of miles out from the center. In fact, the rain is going to be on the west side of the storm because of the interaction with the trough and just a little extra tropical transition that's trying to happen with this. So we're going to get a good bit of rain, and one of the things on my mind is potentially 4 to 8 inches of very fast rain tomorrow morning into midday, coupled with the tide that could 8 feet, 9 feet, maybe. One of the extreme end of the ensemble guidance was 10 feet.
Wow.
But it all depends on where the center ends up. And that's an open question. This morning, the center was going to end up at Hilton Head. As of the 5 o'clock advisory, the center is going to end up in Awendaw. So for downtown Charleston, that makes a big difference. It's a major change between a 10-foot tide and a 7.5-foot tide, which still is flooding, but it's not as bad. So, but it might be counteracted by freshwater flooding on the other side. So, it's a complex situation for sure. And I'm just hoping that folks are, they've got what they need, that they're kind of where they're going to be for the next day or so. Schools are closed. A lot of businesses are closing tomorrow. And so we just hope people are going to be safe and try not to venture out in this, because it's going to be kind of gnarly, especially if Ian does as forecast, which is to make landfall around Awendaw as an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, let's show that forecast cone. People have been looking at one of the latest model runs there, and the forecast cone for the National Hurricane Center shows those winds already creeping into the Carolinas tonight, that landfall by 2 p.m. on Friday. We have a hurricane warning up for the entire South Carolina coast. It extends northward into North Carolina towards Wilmington. We have tropical storm warnings for the Georgia coast, for the Florida coast, for the remainder of the North Carolina coast, including the Outer Banks, and then we have inland warnings. I mean, let me just try to show you guys. This is an overwhelming amount of bulletins, but just to kind of convey for you what the setup is here like tonight, this extends not only along the coast where those hurricane warnings are up, but we have tropical storm warnings that extend inward as of this Thursday night at 9 p.m. to Columbia, to Charlotte, to Greensboro, to Raleigh, and these extend as far to the north and to the west, as say Hickory, the city of Hickory in Catawba County, just one county away from where Scotty Powell is in Burke County in Morganton. And then we have tropical storm warnings as well for portions of like the Augusta area if you're watching from the CRA. So we are anticipating that this storm's wind, heavy rain are going to impact not only the coast, but also further inland. And let's show you what some of those rain totals are going to be like across the area. You can see that the forecast calling for upwards of 7, 8, maybe 9 or 10 inches of rain in some localized spots along the South Carolina coast, in Charleston, in Myrtle Beach, even portions of the Outer Banks. But then we're still looking at amounts 2, 3, 4 inches across portions of the Sandhills, the Piedmont, the western North Carolina foothills and mountains. Let's bring in Scotty Powell, who is keeping an eye on things in the higher elevations. And Scotty, it's no secret that we have seen storm after storm that has caused landslide threats up where you live. Explain that to us.
Yeah, definitely. So, when you get a lot of rain on rocky terrain, and it comes down really heavy and fast, like what we're anticipating tomorrow, that definitely can loosen some rocky soil and cause those landslides. And so we're no stranger to that here in the Western Carolinas, especially up in the mountains, and that is a threat tomorrow. So if you do find yourself out traveling tomorrow afternoon and evening, make sure that you're mindful of that. If you see any mud or anything streaming across a roadway, you want to steer clear of that because the soil could give way and we could see some landslides here in the foothills and the mountains. And James, you were talking about the rainfall, even up here in the foothills where we're getting that extra lift created by the mountains. It could squeeze out additional rainfall. And as you have up right now, we have the excessive rainfall outlook. And that's a moderate threat. Level 3 of 4 extends from the foothills back towards Charlotte into the Piedmont Triad area of Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and even down for a good portion of South Carolina. So that's kind of the bullseye where we're going to expect to see a lot of heavy rain. I will say this, there's going to be a sharp cutoff. And if you are familiar with the Western Carolinas, you may know the Blue Ridge Mountains, may know Black Mountain, going from McDowell County into Buncombe County. I think if you get to the west of the Blue Ridge Mountains, that's where we could start to see lower rainfall totals. So Asheville, a very flood-prone area, you may not see as much rain as you would in Hickory or Morganton or towards Charlotte. So somewhere right around that area, we're going to see a cutoff where 20 miles one way, you may see 5 or 6 inches of rain. 20 miles the other way, you may see 1 to 2 inches of rain. So we'll have to watch that. And we're panning here in Asheville right now. So Asheville's kind of setting on that line. Do they get to 2 to 3, 4 inches of rain, or is it more 1 to 2? That'll all depend on the track once Ian gets inland. So that's something that we're going to be watching. So we have that flood watch up for a lot of the foothills and the Piedmont. That tropical storm warning, as James was talking about, in the Catawba Valley. So Catawba County, Lincoln, Iredell, Cabarrus, Mecklenburg, and then off to the east and south. And we also have a wind advisory up for a good portion of the mountains and the foothills that are not under that tropical storm warning. And again, remember, that means we could see sustained winds in that tropical storm warning of up to 40 miles per hour. So Hickory, Statesville, Charlotte, you can see winds sustained at 40. In that wind advisory area, it's just short of that 40 threshold. So when you're looking at 30 to 35, there's not going to be much difference between 35 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts. We're going to see some gusty winds tomorrow, and all of the areas could see some wind gusts upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour. So a lot of rainfall in a short amount of time, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. You can also expect some trees to come down. So prepare for scattered power outages as well. Don't think we're going to see widespread power outages like they've seen it in Florida, but we could see pockets where if a tree hits the right power line, it could take half of a town out. So we'll just have to be mindful of that as well.
Scotty Powell in Morganton, Western North Carolina foothills. Thank you very much. And I will acknowledge, Scotty, we'll have you troubleshoot your mic there. We could understand you, but it was very kind of overmodulated, as if something maybe got cranked up. I'm getting a thumbs up from Scotty. Scotty just mentioned some of the devastation that was left behind by Ian as it moved through Florida. Let's bring in Dan Whitaker, who is with us live tonight from the Charleston Harbor ahead of what will be the next chapter in this storm. But Dan, you've had a very eventful 24 hours, 36 hours, as had so much of South Florida. We are taking a look at some of your video right now. Just, Dan, I mean, our hearts go out to everyone impacted by this storm. We're taking a look right now at Sarasota. What was this like?
So thanks, James. Sarasota, and this is around Sarasota and also kind of Venice Beach area. That was quite an interesting start to the storm. The bulk of the rain kind of began there, and that's where I started as well. So gusty winds, some street flooding, trees down, some basic stuff like that at the very beginning of the storm. That's before the bulk of the intensity came in. So I just knew that as the storm actually came in and made it inland, that some of these cities were just going to be pretty devastated. Fortunately, this area not as much as some of the others, because it didn't take a direct hit from the main portions of the inner eye wall. But yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was a massive storm, and it affected just a large chunk of Florida.
Yeah, Dan, we're going to go ahead now. We're going to switch to some of your video that you shot in Port Charlotte. We're looking at tractor trailer on its side here. We were trying to get you on our show last night live, but as so many people with friends and family in Florida have found, the cellular connectivity there knocked out along with so much of the other infrastructure. Tell us a little bit about what you saw in the Port Charlotte area.
So Port Charlotte, I mean, first of all, go Florida for having really good highways and kind of street systems for the most part. But once you got off the highway and got to where there were actually light pole or, lots of wires and different types of, structural things like lower roads that could get flooded, that's where I started to see a lot of damage. So I got off the highway there near Port Charlotte. And as I started going through the neighborhoods, just a lot of wires across in the roads, a lot of houses with trees on it. It kind of looked like a EF2 tornado had gone through a lot of these neighborhoods. A lot of houses were unrecognizable. Just a massive amount of damage. Pretty much every tree that you looked at had most of the limbs missing. So it was just bare in a lot of places. And palm trees were unrecognizable. It definitely looked a lot different than I'm sure it did right before that hurricane.
Let's bring Jared Smith back into the conversation, who's going to pick up this portion of our segment of the show where we're going to talk about where Dan is standing. So, Jared, take it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Dan, tell us a little bit about where you are right now, kind of what's around you. It looks like you're at one of the marinas. I know we were talking before the show near the Round Holiday Inn, basically where Highway 61 and Highway 17 kind of fork. So tell us.
I think we lost Jared. So go ahead, Dan, take it from there.
So I'm at the Charleston Harbor right now. And it's interesting kind of seeing the beginning parts of where this storm's going to come in and things like boats, things like you can hear honking behind me. There's a lot of kind of commotion going on. I was just driving around and Walmart closed at 7 p.m. You had a lot of people there trying to get in. The gas stations were already either closing their pumps or out of gas, hard to tell. But people are kind of just running around. It seems like a lot of people are trying to do some last minute preparations. There's definitely this feeling of uncertainty around here where, in Charleston, I think a lot of the locals are used to dealing with flooding and water and tropical events, but there's always kind of that feeling of how bad is this one going to be?
Do you have my audio now?
We got you, Jared. Go ahead.
All right, cool. Yeah, Dan, I'll tell you, just being on the ground, I think, this has been kind of over the past couple of days, we've been seeing this shift, more towards us, at the easterly fetch, not easterly fetch, but this easterly track that Ian has been consistently doing it. It's been consistently east of the forecast track, and that's certainly produced some things. But what's interesting this morning, we, as I mentioned, at the top of the show, we started with today in Hilton Head with the landfall in Hilton Head. Now we're looking at Ondaw, and the guidance suite suggests that maybe it could go even further north. So Charleston's going to be an interesting place because again, those wobbles are going to make a big difference in our impacts here. So Dan, where you're at, just to give folks a general idea of where you're at, again, kind of around the Highway 61, James. I think I see the James Island connector back there. Again, the Round Holiday Inn. That area is going to be susceptible to flooding. And Dan, they were saying that they were having y'all move your cars.
That's right. And I'm kind of just showing really quickly here a view of the harbor. You can see, some of these areas, the water level isn't far from the parking lot here. So even right here, I'm not sure if it's higher than it normally would be, but it looks like the water level is only about 2 feet below where the parking lot is. So it's not going to take much for this to come up and start flooding. Where I'm at is actually the Holiday Inn close by, and the water in the marsh there is basically already up to road level. The attendant at the hotel said that just during high tides that road floods. So they're expecting kind of some flooding to occur. So what they did is they called our room and they said that they will go ahead and shuttle me out to somewhere with higher elevation and bring me back. And so they've been shuttling guests from the hotel out to a different parking lot all night long. They said, this is our last chance to get a shuttle to the people who are down in the lobby. I said, I've got this covered, and I'm going to be going around covering things throughout the early morning and keeping an eye on things and whatnot. But it does make me question, if you're just for whatever reason, visiting this area, or maybe you live here and you wanted to get a hotel room because you thought it was safer, the fact that you had to move your car away and basically more or less trap yourself inside of a hotel as your best option is interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, and Dan, as we speak tonight, we're headed towards high tide in the harbor. It's going to peak around I want to say a little after 11 o'clock, and we're expecting the tide to get up to around 7.9 feet. That's the forecast right now. Now, interestingly, one of the things that I've noted is that we've had a little bit more of a northerly wind at the tide gauge over the last couple hours, and that seems to have knocked down some of the departures. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up. But Dan, from your observations too, it sounds like that there's already been a good bit of water loading. So I think that even if the departures are knocked down a little bit, it certainly seems like that we may be in for, certainly a high-end moderate event tonight that'll close a lot of roads. And then tomorrow morning, with heavy rain in the area, and again, this peak tide, and again, we don't know how bad it's going to be. The Weather Service forecast is 8.7 feet. They're going to update that here pretty soon. We don't know exactly, what that's going to look like. It could either be really good or really bad. Honestly, it could either work out either way. So it's certainly a precarious position down there. And Dan, where you are, I mean, there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of roads that flood there. Again, there's the Highway 17 to Highway 61, or Highway 61 off of Highway 17. That's going to get cut off. It's going to get cut off tonight and again tomorrow. So, there's, that's just one example. And there's gonna be places that don't normally see issues with flooding that are gonna have issues with flooding. James Island surprisingly doesn't see a lot of issues with typical tidal flooding. That could be a different story tomorrow. Mount Pleasant, which has areas along Long Point Road, locals know where this is, around the Snee Farm Country Club. There's a marshy area there that tends to get overwhelmed during high-end, moderate, or major coastal flood events. So we're gonna have a lot of travel problems regardless tomorrow. And then with the rain, the freshwater flood threat goes inland, North Charleston, Somerville, parts of Goose Creek. So we're certainly going to want to watch that closely. And Dan, it'll be interesting to see how things evolve down there tomorrow because, depending on where the center tracks, I mean, downtown Charleston could see gusts up to 70 miles an hour as forecasted by the Weather Service. So it could get pretty rough and tumble down there.
Yeah, I'm kind of prepared for anything at this point, and and I hope everyone else is too. It doesn't make me too confident seeing some of the stores close early, and even one of the people at the hotel, one of the servers, was saying he was going to jet over to Walmart and grab some water before the big event tomorrow, and what he didn't know is, the Walmart he was planning to go to had already closed by that point. So, there's people who are still trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's shifted a lot, and I wonder if there has been, if people have been following the forecast a little more closely than they should have been, I think, or not as closely as they should have been. So, we'll see. Hopefully everybody's got what they need and they're going to be safe. And again, I think there's James, you've got you got the hurricane track up here right now.
Yeah.
I mean, again, hurricane warning goes from basically South Carolina Georgia border up through Myrtle Beach now into Wilmington, and that was added on late this evening. Again, for as surprised as some Charlestonians seem to be, this could even be a bigger surprise for Myrtle Beach, because 2 days ago they weren't even in this.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the forecast cone is very skinny right now, Jared, but there's still some wiggle room on that cone,
and that's significant.
Yeah, that is significant, and that is significant for the coast, but also for where I am in Charlotte, or places like Columbia, Greensboro, Raleigh, right? Because as we learned last night, the dirty side, the northeast side, the top right side of that circulation is essentially the worst side to be on. No side is fun, but that's where the strongest and the biggest severe weather threat is. So when I look at this forecast cone from a Charlotte perspective, if this makes landfall and comes through Charleston, that really would keep it on a trajectory that's going to bring some of the worst weather into Charlotte. But just a slight shift north for the landfall towards Myrtle Beach would actually be enough to shift that dirty side closer to Greensboro and Raleigh, and lesser the chances of seeing severe weather in Charlotte. It doesn't give us into the clear by any means, but it lessens the chances, and that's where some of the ambiguity still is in this forecast. What I want to do now is I want to go ahead and pop back up on the screen and time this out here a little bit for folks when they can expect to see certain things, right? So if we use the latest run of the HRRR as our future cast, here we are in about real time. You can begin to see some of the rain already pushing onshore. The eye is still offshore. Some of those heavy bands begin to move into coastal communities during the overnight hours, and then during the morning hours is when you can expect a really rough morning commute, if there is still such a thing, in that I-95 and coastal corridor. I imagine there's not. I know Charlotte is already shutting down, because by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon, as the eye is nearing that landfall, the outer bands here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon are now pushing into Union County, North Carolina, the city of Monroe, pushing into Charlotte, pushing into that I-85 corridor through, say, Spencer, North Carolina, into Greensboro. Columbia, you're certainly in it at this point, as is Raleigh. Still drier maybe in the Clemson area and Asheville, where the rain will get there a little bit later on in the evening hours. And then tomorrow afternoon, around that 2, 3, 4 o'clock time frame, as the eye comes ashore of this particular model run, trying to put it into Myrtle Beach per se, you'll continue to see those heavy bands of thunderstorms moving through now portions of Wilmington, I-95, Greenville, North Carolina, and that heavy rain extending all across the Carolinas. I mean, really, at the end of the day, the key messaging is heavy rains, flooding from the heavy rains, flooding from the storm surge, potential landslides from the floods and heavy rain. So everyone's got their own little specialty, whether it be a little bit more in the tornadoes, a little bit more in the storm surge, a little bit more in the landslides. But at the end of the day, we're all kind of going to get a taste of Hurricane Ian, Tropical Storm Ian, Depression Ian. And man, we haven't said this yet, but I really need to say this. Don't get too caught up on, oh, it's just a Category 1. Oh, it's just a tropical storm. There are going to be a lot of people who will want to breathe a sigh of relief when this inevitably becomes a tropical storm or depression again, and that is certainly good news, but it doesn't change the impacts for most people, because most people are in it for the rain and the flooding, and that's coming regardless of whatever name you want to call this thing. Let's bring back in Scotty Powell, Western North Carolina Foothills. He's had some more time to read comments and reflect. And Scotty, I know by 11 o'clock tomorrow night, by nightfall tomorrow night, that heavy rain, that landslide threat is really going to have set in where you are.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, as this weather is going to be moving from east to west, so If you live in Charlotte, obviously by daybreak, you're going to see more rain than you would in the western part of the state, but eventually all that heavy rain moves into the mountains. So again, here recapping for western North Carolina, the primary concern will be the heavy rain, and it's going to happen in a short amount of time. So just looking at flash flood guidance here, and it's like 3 inches in 3 hours, and that could be achievable tomorrow if we get some of those heavier rain bands to set up. There's one thing, James, I wanted to share with everyone before I kind of get into everything else. Let me make sure that I have this page pulled up.
Is this football?
No, it's not football. It shouldn't be.
Oh, no, lake levels. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So we got lake levels here. Just kind of was looking at what Duke Energy has been doing all week. And you can see some of these lakes. Lake James right now at 95.7 feet. Remember, full pond is 100. So we got like 4 feet there. That which is good. Lake Roadhiss, which is the next lake down from Lake James, 95 feet, and then you got Lake Hickory, then Lake Lookout Shoals, which dumps into Lake Norman, and then Mountain Island Lake, and then Lake Wally down where James is at, and then this feeds all the way down South Carolina into the Atlantic Ocean. So you can see a lot of these lakes are right around 94 to 96 feet. Which is good because that means that whatever rain does fall, at least it's not full pond. At least the lakes have a little leeway to build up before we start to see some river flooding from things that are going on with the heavy rain. So we got heavy rain tomorrow, gusty winds as well. So if you are listening tonight, James mentioned it already. I know a lot of school systems have called for e-learning days or totally out. A lot of county offices are closing down at least for half a day tomorrow. So I've always been telling people today, if you can get things done by lunchtime, anytime after lunchtime, things are going to start going downhill. But Jared, things are going to start going downhill in your area way before lunchtime.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little tropical cinnamon roll for breakfast. To put it that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a windy and wet day tomorrow. So just hunker down. The good thing, which we haven't really talked a lot about in this program, is we're looking at Saturday and the Sunday.
Yeah.
Where we thought Saturday may be kind of a total washout as well. It doesn't look to be the case. We'll definitely see the chance of seeing some scattered showers, even some breezy conditions, but that consistent heavy rain doesn't look to stick around on Saturday. There's going to be a big dry slot punch in, and so that will help clear out some of the heavier rain. So Saturday and Sunday, like halfway decent, still kind of chilly. That's another thing, guys, that we haven't talked about. Is just how cool the temperatures are going to be. I mean, a lot of places, at least here in the western part of North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, may not get out of the 50s or low 60s tomorrow. So it's not going to have that tropical vibe to it as you would associate with a tropical storm. It's going to be pretty chilly here as well. So kind of a cool, wet day. So you can find something good to do inside tomorrow. That is what we would recommend.
Brad Panovich at work today said it's not going to feel like a hurricane. It's going to feel like a nor'easter. As a northerner, yes, that felt very relatable. Scotty just mentioned this. The timing from where we were in the beginning of the week has improved significantly. So if you're heading to Bank of America Stadium for Charlotte FC for the Panthers game, if you're heading to Clemson for the Clemson and NC State game, it may not be beautiful warm weather. It may be damp and windy, but most of the impacts will be out of here. Most of these events will be able to get off, which is, for better or for worse, for so many other events that proactively decided to postpone. It's tricky. It's tricky business, especially when you have other people's lives and safety and property at risk, certainly planning these big events ahead of time. So I wouldn't want to be in that role. Let's give last closing thoughts to Dan Whitaker, the man who has traveled many miles and many hours from his home in North Carolina to Florida and now back again to South Carolina. Dan, what comes next for you as the storm approaches?
James, we will see how things go here. Basically, my plan at this moment is to take it as it comes. I plan to meet hopefully the eye wall of the storm head on. So if that ends up being Myrtle Beach, then that's where I plan to be. For now, I'm kind of just hanging around here, watching the models, watching the National Hurricane Center's official track, and just trying to kind of stay out of floodwater. So I've got cameras and a lot of preparation and a lot of days worth of food. And so whatever happens, I'll be there for it. And I'll make sure that I stay safe and that I'm doing the best coverage I can.
That's a lot of good things you hit on, not only for folks who might be storm chasing, but for folks who are trying to ride this out at home. I'm charging the batteries. I'm getting some food together. We are finding any candles, and we're going to cut this show on the relative shorter side because we're going to practice what we preach. We're going to go make sure our families are ready. We're going to go make sure our property is ready. We still have a last few hours to prepare, and the event will be here tomorrow. It'll be a long and exhausting day. We're going to wrap up here in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and read one last message that Scotty Powell just put in, announcing that ferry service in North Carolina is suspended until further notice, as you might suspect, as the heavy winds and the surf do approach. So that's good to mention. I appreciate that. And the Carolina Weather Group team will keep you informed throughout the day tomorrow and into Saturday. You can follow us on Twitter for real-time warnings of flash flood warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings. There is a slight chance that we could see embedded in this tropical system some embedded small rotations. So don't be surprised if we do get a couple of tornado warnings. The biggest threat for that will kind of be further east you are, going back to that whole concept of that dirty side of the storm. You can find us anytime streaming on YouTube. Just search for the Carolina Weather Group. Our nonstop channel, the Carolina Weather Net, will be streaming. That's a place that you can watch for free. You can park it on any device that has YouTube. Your phone, your computer, your smart TV, leave it up. And then our crew will be along with live updates throughout the day as conditions warrant. So you can leave it there, or if you'd rather just be notified every time we come up for a live update, you can, of course, subscribe and hit that bell to be notified to your device when we are live as conditions warrant. Expect multiple updates throughout the day. We've got Dan out there. We've got Jared in Charleston. We've got Scotty up in the foothills. So we've got all the terrain, all the regions kind of covered for you, and our crews will be keeping an eye on this throughout the next couple hours. Our thoughts and prayers, again, with the folks in Florida, hoping for the best here in the Carolinas. Be prepared to do whatever you got to do tonight to be ready for this tomorrow. And I think by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, we will all finally be breathing that sigh of relief. On behalf of everyone here at the Carolina Weather Group, I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. We'll talk to you again real soon.